That's right. Fantasy Grounds College. I'm here with a good friend of mine and one of the founding members of Fantasy Grounds College. I'm here with one of my first students. We know him as GM Jankin, but I know him as Patty. We've known each other for quite some time. We've had our ups and downs, but we still love this hobby. And we've come together today to discuss some things that are blaringly erroneous or problematic or even sometimes frustrating. So, we are going to talk to all of you out there in the interwebs. And without further ado, here's Patty.
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. So, we're going to talk about a variety of topics. Some of them we're going to relate to Fantasy Grounds directly. A few of them might be rules things. The other will be player or DM etiquette. So we're going to cover a range of things. So I guess I'm going to start off with you, Patty. I want to know what it's like for you when you set up a campaign. Let's
Well,
say blank canvas.
normally if I have a blank canvas, so first time players, most of the cases I do have my players join me. But if it's some players that are new and they don't know how I run things, normally have a session 0, discuss what we want from the campaign. We discuss, what is everyone expected to, what I'm expected to do for them, and normally we set the rules there. So then from day one, if I have sometimes if I have any other new players joining, I have a one-on-one with them so they know the case and they're not coming to a place and into a new environment where they do stuff that, well, it might disrupt the group.
That's great. That is one of the things I emphasize in the DM 101 class is to get that session 0 because I don't know how many times I've started a random campaign and they just don't go anywhere fast because we haven't taken the time to get to know each other, and B, we don't really have the backstories of the characters fleshed out, and C, we don't even really have a plan or a schedule. So I can appreciate that.
It was one of the first things you taught me.
Good. I don't remember teaching it to you. It's been a while, but I'm sure I mentioned something about it.
Yeah, I'm probably guessing that everything's changed. It's evolving, especially how you teach classes. I'm probably guessing.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I haven't changed a whole lot. I think what I tend to do, which is not always good, is I try to cover too much. And I think sometimes that can be very intimidating and frustrating for new students. But at the same time, I feel like, well, I have you now. So I'm going to give you all the information I can until you want to quit. That's kind of how I look at it because I don't necessarily know if I'll see you again. So I'm trying to give you or a person as much information as possible, even if they have to leave me hanging, saying, hey, I got to go. I'll ramble on and on. I can go for 12 hours if I have to, but I prefer not to. That's a long day.
Lady Shell just says I went. Oh, then I mean she's here now.
Hey, Shell.
She was saying it wasn't showing up for her, but it must have taken a few seconds because you know what Twitch is like.
Yeah, it's got the delay in there.
Yeah. Yeah, we just went live, so it must have just shown up now.
So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I do try, and too much information can be just as harmful as too little information. So yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person who says, I really want you to learn this, and I pester the heck out of you until you finally give in. But, at the same time, I want people to have their space, and I don't want them to feel intimidated or smothered. So I have been a little bit better about that over the last couple of years. Um, it's something I have to kind of refrain from doing.
Yeah, what the White Dwarf says, I just disagree. Never had too much info. I do agree with that to a certain degree. Like new players who are completely new to Fantasy Grounds, too much information can be a little overwhelming. You know, it's like studying. You take it in bite-sized bites. You know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of time. Uh,
Oh, give me a second.
yep. And I'll boost
Pardon
your
me,
volume
my
up
volume
too.
was really low.
Yeah, I boosted you up on the audio mixer too.
Okay, you carry on, Laerun.
All right.
Have Sifa
So
speak.
I'm going to start a new campaign with the 5th edition rule set. Now, obviously, there's 50,000 other rule sets, but I'm going to use this because this is what I'm most familiar with. If you guys like Pathfinder or Savage Worlds or some of the other rule sets, I apologize, but this is more focused in and around a lot of the
Laerun, I think you
lessons.
may have cut out there.
Really?
Yeah, you cut out a little slightly.
Huh. Okay. Well, I was saying that we are going to use the 5th edition rule set today. We can try doing other rule sets as we get other people in here that know more about them. So I just wanted to point that out that we're going to use the 5th edition rule set. We're going to go over some annoying things, some frustrating things, and often forgotten things. And this will pertain to in Fantasy Grounds and around the table. So Patty and I are going to bounce off each other and we're going to talk about these subjects. So, right off the get go, one of the things that most people struggle with Fantasy Grounds in its current state is the connection. And that can be very frustrating. I don't know how many times I've had people go and buy a bunch of books and they're all excited to play. And then they get to this point where they're getting ready to connect and have all their friends connect to them. And they're not sure what's going on. It's not working. So the connection test is something you want to check before you go out and buy a bunch of stuff. This will get better when Unity actually becomes a public thing and they get everything straightened out. It will eliminate most of those problems. But until then, we still have to deal with that. And there are workarounds. You can come into the college and you can ask the experts. We also have a knowledge base online that has articles with this particular problem. Now, Patty, I remember when we first started, you had this issue. Do you remember how it was that you fixed it?
Yeah, it was. Turns out it was with the current provider I had. It was using the IP for Remote Connect. Oh, sorry, the
Ah,
same port for Remote Connect. And yes, I have so many bad memories of it. It actually sort of like gives me flashbacks. 20 hours it took me to fix it, to figure
oh
out it
my
was wrong.
God. Sorry about that. I just remember going through that and then
Oh no,
having
you're
you
good.
go through it, and it's like, well, you do this and you do that, and you're like, mate, it's not that. It can get really frustrating. So if you are that person and you're having those issues, please come to Fantasy Grounds College. We have a bunch of people who have gone through that same scenario for 100 different reasons. And I'm about 90% sure that we can probably help you, unless you have an IP6 connection, which we cannot ensure that you're going to be able to connect. If you have a VPN, that might be a good solution or workaround like Hamachi or OpenVPN or something like that. So there is some alternatives out there, but nothing is more frustrating than not being able to connect to your players. That is
I
really,
think you
really frustrating.
went silent again, Leon,
Huh.
after you said about the alternative.
Okay. Well, the alternative would be um, to basically get a VPN like Hamachi or to get um, some kind of like open VPN. There's a bunch of things listed in the official Fantasy Grounds forums as potential workarounds. So that is something that all players, especially DMs, are going to have to deal with. So there's not much we can do about it right now. But if you, like I said, if you are having those trouble, please come in and we'll try to help you as best we can. Now we're not liable for it, but we'll definitely try to help. So once I've named this campaign and I picked the rule set, I've selected some extensions here, and I wanted to have a little talk with Patty about extensions. We had texted each other earlier today about this, and there's a couple things that are very, very annoying and very, very taboo about extensions. You want to tell us a couple of those, Patty?
Okay, first of all, you need to see if they're working current build. That can cause you a lot of issues. It can even sometimes prevent you from even having the table up because people can't join to the table, or it gives you so many errors. It can even lag you out and cause your table to stop running and potentially shut your table and potentially lose a lot of stuff that you've done. And also having, like, for example, if you're a player as well and suggesting certain extensions, you need to yourself need to know if it's going to work for the table as well. And also as a DM, you need to be open-minded about certain extensions. Do work really improve the game so much that, like, for example, if you have bad vision and your the text is too small, you should be able to get a font extension. Sometimes DMs don't like getting extensions at all, but you need to be able to listen to players, and for stuff like vision and that, you need it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. One of the ones that I tend to use, it used to be called Big Font, and then they had 14-point font. But now there's one that was built by the community by Matakure. He's one of our instructors. It is called the Montserrat font extension, and it is available for free in our community. So if you come in, it's pinned in our main general chat. You download it, you put it in your extensions folder, and before you load into your campaign, you're going to select it. So right here, I have it font Montserrat. So that is what you do for getting a larger font. One thing I do have to say about fonts on the other side of this is try not to rely on too many fonts. Quite often, people get too used to them, and they end up building their entire campaign around using these extensions. And if for some reason the author cannot keep up with the changes in Fantasy Grounds, then you're going to be SOL. So in other words, the font, or excuse me, the extension may not work after beyond a certain point, or that person might give up developing it. So unless you can take it over or make your own version of it, just be careful about extensions that change the way Fantasy Grounds works. Um, it can really break the game, and sometimes if you rely on something too much, the day it breaks is really going to be tough on you. So you really need to follow the forum where you downloaded it. You need to make sure that the author is still actively working on it. And I would check the thread at least once a week to see if there's been any developments. And there really is no way to know if any changes were made, but you can subscribe to the thread in the official Fantasy Grounds forums. So that is one way you can keep up on your favorite extensions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. Once that is loading, hey Londell, what's up? So we got Londell in the house. Schmo, how you doing? Dax is in the house. Cool. Lady Shell will be in and out.
Yeah, she's off.
Okay. Hey. So I have a horrendous load time for Fantasy Grounds. So while it's taking forever to load, I can assure you that that can be a little better if you keep your folder organized. So in other words, don't have 50,000 modules in your modules folder. You can put subfolders in there and organize them in there if you're not using them. and Fantasy Grounds will not load those or scan for them as you're loading up your interface. So please try to keep your module folder clean and organized. It is very, very handy to do so.
It's the same with tokens and portraits as well. I keep them all organized in different folders.
Yes, it is very important to do that.
Images as well for maps and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Take the time to rename stuff. Don't just go, here's a picture of a goblin, and it's picture 1258X57. I mean, what is that? So take the moment to look at the size of the photo, rename it, and if you have to, trim it up, whatever you need to do. But that will help with the organizational part, and it will be better to use with Fantasy Grounds as far as memory usage. So here I am in this campaign setup. I actually have a custom extension. So the caveat here is if this breaks on the next version of Fantasy Grounds, I will not be able to update this because I was not the author. But this particular setup window has a direct link to the Fantasy Grounds College website and to our Discord. So this is a custom campaign setup window. And this was made by Shadzar. So I'm going to hit next. So here's the user manual, the wiki user guides, and the forums. I would definitely get used to using those tools. They are there for you. Those are your first point of contact. If you're not getting help or the type of help you're looking for is not there, then you can come to the college and we'll try to help you as best we can. We try to work with Smiteworks as a team. We have a good working relationship, and I intend to keep it that way. So whether you get the information from there or from us, hopefully you're going to trust that we're going to try to give you the best information that we have available. By the way, I did finally read the user manual. When I first started Fantasy Grounds, I did not. And I think it would have saved me a lot of headaches had I read a little bit of it before I started playing. Part of the premise of Fantasy Grounds College is we don't read the goddamn manual. So that is why we have the college, at least initially. It's certainly changed since then, but yeah, that's definitely something that you should probably at least look through. It doesn't really tell you how to use a rule set with the particular software, but it does show you what things are and what their labels mean. So it gives you that at least, and you know what's what. So, Patty, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, there's actually surprisingly a lot of the modules do have their own manual. Like for example, the player's handbook, it actually has its own manual. It goes into stuff about more deep and like into classes, races, lore, and things like that. Which is all available on that actual physical book. It's just been put into a reference manual for you to go through.
Yeah.
I believe it's through you. If you go onto your library, you click the module you've loaded, and it should actually show you multiple options, and there should be one of them should be the main reference manual for everything.
Yeah, so I'm going to show that. I'm going to load just the 5e core rules. And it's going to take a minute because it has to scan the library and make sure that you own them. And it will open all of those up in one shot. So this is fairly new. This campaign setup thing came out a year ago, and I really wish we had it in the beginning, at least when I started. Okay, so I just loaded those up. I'm going to the library now. So if you are one of those people, such as myself, that has went out and purchased the hardback books, you have D&D Beyond, and then you have this digital product, and you probably have a Roll20 version as well. I do sympathize with you. I know it's a pain in the butt to have to buy the same book over and over and over, but I really think it's worth the time and effort. And you don't have to go out and buy all the books at once. I think that's a misnomer that a lot of people they have that assumption that they need to go out and buy everything. Honestly, if you just start with the player's handbook and you use some of the core rules, which I have loaded here now, you can build your own monster manual, your own, books. You don't have to own every single one. It's just nice to have one or two books to have a template. That way you kind of have an idea of how these things are arranged and structured. And once you understand that, you can enter your own settings, or maybe you own some of the books in D&D Beyond. It wouldn't take you a lot of time to copy it from there into Fantasy Grounds. Unfortunately, there are no PDFs for the 5th edition rule set, at least not for the official books. But if you have a D&D Beyond account, the text is right there. You can actually move a lot of that content into Fantasy Grounds. I think the rule books, I would probably buy those. But as far as the settings go, I would just use my D&D Beyond account. If you have one, of course. So as Patty was saying, that the official rule books actually come with a reference manual. So for instance, this D&D Player's Handbook, if I click here, it gives you this list of all these different links, which somewhat corresponds with all of these banners on the right-hand side. Now, the exception would be the reference manual, and if there were any pre-gens, those do not show up over here. But in this case, I'm going to click all so that I have access to all the different banners. And I'm going to click on this D&D Player's Handbook, and I'm going to look for the reference manual, which is here. And most of the D&D Wizards of the Coast official books, they have a reference manual. This is the actual digital representation of the hardback books. So if I click up here, I have all these chapters that I can go through. And if you want to search for something, you have a search field down here. You can click on the chapters. You have these arrows down below in which you are able to scroll through the pages just like you're turning pages in a book. One caveat that was added to the player's handbook, which I'm surprised actually happened, is I begged Zacchaeus if he would add the correct build order for characters for this particular rule set. So we do teach this in Fantasy Grounds College, and there are 4 main steps to creating a character. So Patty, do you remember what those are?
Yep. Ability scores,
Mm-hmm.
always first.
Yep.
Now, the rule of thumb, you would have your background, race, then class.
Correct.
But the background and race can be done in any order between those two, but Jenny would do that.
That's right. I'm glad you remembered that, because I would be sad if you didn't.
As far as the grounds 101, mate. For
Yeah.
me, at least.
Yeah.
But this normally applies for all rule sets.
Okay.
Oh, most of them. Like, it does it for Starfinder that I found. It's very similar.
Okay. I know that Pathfinder 2 has a built-in character creator, so it kind of helps you.
I haven't tried it, so.
Yeah, I looked at it. I did take a character creation class in Pathfinder 2, and it does have a thing that kind of takes you step by step, which is interesting. I wish this one did too.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. But anyways, you can always bookmark anything in these books. And to have this in the official player's handbook is huge. Technically, Smiteworks could get in trouble for this. I wouldn't say big trouble, but Wizards of the Coast could say, "Hey, we don't want that in our product." So they I don't think that'll happen, but this does not belong in the official rulebook. This is a Fantasy Grounds thing that kind of plagues a lot of new users. So we were very lucky to have Zacchaeus add this. So my hat's off.
there's always a workaround that they could easily make it as a separate module that gets handed out to students.
Correct.
So the thing is, all they do is it'll be hampering themselves if they those are the coasts came around and stopped that, because it would get people to buy more of their products
Right.
if it's there.
That's right.
So
Let's see. So if you wanted to look up something, let's say classes, and you wanted to come back here later, get used to this drag and drop functionality. If you click on that link, you get this pop-out page, which is almost like photocopying the page out of a book. And then you can drag this over to your hotkeys. That is one of the most useful and helpful features in Fantasy Grounds is the ability to create shortcuts to different content. It really helps out a lot. So I think I'm going to load up a couple modules, and we're going to talk about some player stuff that tends to happen around the table. But then I'm also going to get down deep into some of this character creation stuff that often goes wrong or is forgotten, and a few other things that happen around the table that are kind of annoying or not very wise. All right, so I'm going to load some other modules here. I'm going to load some pre-gens that I built for the community. They're 3rd level. It's 5th edition. I made these so I have a quick start. I got tired of not having characters built, so I went ahead and built like 11 of them. And these are based off old characters that I'd ran in my career as being a DM and a player. So I went ahead and load those so I can use those to help us illustrate some things. The other is I'm going to load up a map pack. This is going to be a Game Tile Warehouse map pack. One of my favorite authors and artists, Chris. I know a lot of you already know his work, but he has his own website. It's GameTileWarehouse.com, and he sells his maps individually, and he also sells them as packs on the Fantasy Grounds official store, and I'm pretty sure they're available on Steam. So these are part of the Meander series, and I am going to load this Venmire Woods Part 2. There are a bunch of other ones here. Let's see. Shard Roads, that's a snow one. There's a ship one that's based off of pirates and oceanic adventures. There's a couple jungle ones. Yeah, I think I'm going to load the Venmire Woods Part 2. So I'm loading these things up. And honestly, this is probably about all I need. Um, One of the things that people tend to do when they first get Fantasy Grounds is they go basically batshit crazy. They start loading a whole bunch of modules and tokens, and before you know it, Fantasy Grounds will come to a screeching halt. So you need to be careful as to how much material that you load, especially if you're sharing it with your table with your friends. It actually multiplies the number of people that you share with. So if you have a file that's half a meg and you have 6 people around the table, you will multiply that, and that file size will increase, and that takes up your bandwidth. So be careful on how much stuff you share and make available. Generally, you don't need all these books when you're playing. Normally, I would connect with one player at a time and basically share just the books that we're going to use for character creation. Once we're done, I'll pretty much close all those out except for maybe the player's handbook in case you need to switch spells out. And at that time, if you need to level up, then I'll load the books back up in a separate session. So it is a little bit of monkeying around, but it does keep the memory usage down and it keeps the resources free. So that's one of the things that you can do to keep Fantasy Grounds a little bit more stable is by not having too many things open at once. So that means modules, map packs, pre-gens, tokens, images, and maps. If you have too many and they're loaded up and then you share those with your players, you need to learn how to unshare. So what that means is if I open this image up and I right click on this pin and I share it, the share sheet option, when we're done with that photo, if we're not going to use it again, then I will unshare it by coming back to the maps and images and click on the P for public, and that unshares it with the group. And what that does is it frees up memory and resources. So this is a common mistake and problem that you'll all run into if you tend to use a ton of different images and maps. You can only get about 3.5 gigs out of Fantasy Grounds before it crashes on you. So you want to try to mitigate that as much as possible. So as your campaign grows and you share more and more images, that memory is going to expand. So make sure you go up and clean up after yourself and release any modules that you're not using at the time. It'll be very helpful, and your campaign will stay active, and you won't get as many crashes.
Dax has just asked a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you click on the info on the shield, that you say, example, if you had the link or it's on your character, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it does. It normally prompts for you to auto load it, and also the DM side of it, it'll say that a player is trying to load something that isn't currently loaded
Right.
from their character sheet or their links that they have down the bottom. Fantasy Grounds automatically asks if you want to load this.
Yes.
It comes with a pop-up box, I believe, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the chat window it'll say player so and so is trying to access this, and you can allow it or not. For me, I don't normally allow it unless it's a book that I have. The reason for that is if you're the DM and you have a player that owns more content than you, if for some reason they want to level up their character and you do not have those books available and they build their character around a book that you don't have, it can potentially break their character when you go to level up. The character will play fine up until you have to level. If you don't have the same sources and you build their character and it's not open and available to you, when they level up, it pulls in traits and different features that you get every so often. And if you don't have the correct sources loaded, it'll break the character. So that's the danger of allowing different sources at your table that you do not own. But there's no problem with it, it's just more of a cautionary thing. Another thing you can do is if you have a big table with people all over the world, let's say I'm playing with Patty, he's over in the UK, I got a couple people in the US, let's say I have Calchas, he is over in Australia, and you can have people quite a ways away. So the further they are from me, as being on the west coast of the United States, the longer these images need to travel to get to that person. So to help with that, you can right click on any image ahead of time before your game session starts. And if you know for sure that you're going to be sharing this map, you can click sharing and then preload image. And what that does, see, it's shared, but when they sign on to the table, it immediately starts downloading so that you don't have to wait and they don't have to wait when you decide to push a large image, especially if it's a big like overland map or something like that. You may want to choose the preload image, and when you do share it, it'll instantly pop up on their screen instead of waiting a few seconds to load because of the distance between you and the host or you and the players. So that is a workaround in order to cache the images ahead of time. So that would be a good thing to do when you're doing character creation or maybe in between sessions to figure out which images you're going to use in your next campaign or your next session, and have a lot of those preloaded, the ones that you're going to use. Once you're done, again, you'd click this little P here for public and unpublish it so that they will not see it. And it especially, they don't need access to it if it's not important, then just unshare it. So that is how you manage your campaign to keep the memory usage down and to keep things more organized. And that also helps with the memory load and how much you have to push to your players when you're playing. So you want to make sure that if you have huge maps that you try to pre-share those ahead of time, especially if your players are all over the world. You're going to need those extra seconds. So tokens is another thing that people go crazy on, and I'm one of them, is you have all these tokens that come with the player's handbooks and some of the official products. And technically, what you'll get are these POGs. These are generally low res images. They generally don't take up a lot of memory, and they are contained within a module. So what that means is when you go to use these, they will not load until you need them or until they are attached to an encounter or a NPC stat block. However, if you go into your folders within Fantasy Grounds and you dump a whole bunch of tokens in there, let's see, you'll have a bunch of loose ones and they will not be in these fancy little bags. They'll be scattered all over here. What that potentially does is it will take all those tokens and load them into memory, even if you're not going to use them, even if you don't open them. So if you have them all loose sitting in here and you got like over 100 of them, that may not be a good thing because even if you're not using 90% of them, they're all going to be loaded into memory. So to avoid that, you want to put them in these collections. And there are ways to build your own modules, or you can buy them already pre-packaged. But the thing is you need to basically manage your memory and try not to have too many loaded, especially if you don't need them. Now, right now, all of these sets are contained, except for this one. I actually have this one shared. That's why it has a little face there. And these are pogs that I made myself. And these are just basically things I'm using for campaigns. And there's not too many. So I'm not too worried about those. And I know they're fairly low file size count, so I'm not too worried about it. But that is something that people tend to go overboard on. So if you're buying tokens or you're making your own, it would be wise to figure out how to make your own token packs. That way, A, you'll know what's in the token packs, and B, they will not load into memory unless you are using them. So that is the moral of that story. So I don't know how many times I had gone to Zacchaeus when I first started Fantasy Grounds and saying, every time I load Fantasy Grounds, it crashes. First thing he asked me was, how many tokens do you have loaded? And I'm like, what's that got to do with it? And it has a lot to do with it because Fantasy Grounds will load those if they are loose and they are not in these collections. So that is something that will improve with Unity. But until then, we have to work with what we have. So hopefully that helps a little bit with managing tokens and accessing the library and sharing images. So let's go to a character party type thing, Patty. I think I've rambled
Okay.
quite a bit.
Yeah, and the tokens, that's one of my biggest collections, actually. I just linked you the image that's all my tokens for PC tokens on this on my sheet. But I have everything in categories as well, so I have a folder in the folder.
Yeah, so he has it nicely organized, and they are not all scattered and loose. So
Yeah,
that really helps keep it down.
I have them all based on races and that. So I have one for humans, one for goblins, so forth, so forth. But that's all the player token. They can't see the ones I have in in my DM. I have a even bigger one there, but that's all for NPCs and stuff. But they're all categorized as well.
Huh. Very cool. Yeah, so when you're basically making your characters, there are so many variables and factors that can easily go wrong or be missed. And if you're not really familiar with the given rule set that you're working in, it's very simple to miss out on some important things. It's not the end of the world. Actually, making mistakes and learning from them and finding out where this material is located is paramount to learning how to play role playing games. It is part of the experience. In no way would I want to rob that from any of you, because I don't know how many goddamn years I struggled because I didn't pay attention or read the rules or learn from my mistakes. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't get something automated or maybe you forget a roll or, oh crap, I forgot to roll advantage, or maybe you don't even know what that is. Those things come with time. So there's really no way to teach all those in one session. That's something that's going to come out over time. And a lot of this comes down to patience. You need to be patient with your group. And what I mean by patient is if you're new, you're very excited to play, but you're learning a lot. And hopefully you'll get to listen as well as participate and not talk over people and get mad because you're not the center of attention or whatever the issue might be. The other half of that is if you're a veteran player and you know what you're doing and you have new players at the table, in order to make that fun for everybody, you kind of have to sit back and let things happen. Unless it's obviously super ridiculous, then you can pull your DM aside and say, "Hey, I don't know if this is my cup of tea. Can you write me out of the story or make something up why I can't come? Because I don't really want to participate in this game." Instead of being an asshole during the game and making the new players not feel welcome. That is something you want to avoid. That can actually break somebody's future in wanting to play role playing games ever again. And that is something you really want to avoid, even if you can't get along with the people who are at your table. At least have the courtesy to be an adult and try to work through these problems. And if you're just not feeling it or the table chemistry is not there, then just tell somebody and be a man or a woman about it and step up and say, look, I can't do this. And don't have a big meltdown because your needs are not being met. That is very unprofessional, and I really don't like that either.
Not
So,
talking about it is just as bad as well.
correct.
We've had some players who have went dark in the past, and it is very frustration from both the player and the DM side. Some DMs take it as more personal because it seems as if they're not doing the job, and I have experienced this as a player and a DM.
Yeah. You can really break the experience for somebody for the rest of their life. It's almost like when you go to school and you really like school, and then you have that one teacher that picked on you, that made you feel like an idiot, or didn't give you the right engagement. And at that point, for the rest of your life, you don't like math because that teacher screwed with you. So I really don't want that to happen to anybody if possible. So if you're a new player, be patient, baby steps, don't burn yourself out. Take the time to read and figure things out and take the lead of your DM and your fellow players, and you'll fit right in. I'm not saying being a pushover and a yes man. I'm saying be willing to open your mind and learn. And usually new players are fun. They don't really give me too many problems, but after you play it a few times, you'll start noticing different patterns of different people at your table. And you might grow to not really trust or like some of those players. So if that's the case, you should tell your DM as quickly as you can in private before or after the session. That way the DM can make some arrangements. If you just not show up anymore because you don't like what's going on, that really doesn't help the whole experience. And that also holds true for veteran players. If you don't like what's going on, your needs are not being met with that campaign, then you need to move on. Don't be the asshole and stick around and make things miserable for everybody else. Take the time and say, look, I'm not going to play anymore. Write me out of the story. I'll go find something else to do. I would rather hear that than just being a butthole the whole time the game's being played. I don't know if you've ever had that, Patty, but I have.
Well, remember, mate, it did happen to us.
But, you know,
I think I could have handled it better at the time, but yeah.
it happens. Um, that chemistry that you want to look for in a table is, look for those people that have a similar or opposite play style as you to have fun. Um, you don't want to be clashing every time you play. It gets old. And pretty soon you get the same two people fighting all the time, and then it makes the experience really poor for the rest of the group. So when the chemistry starts breaking down, at that point the DM should make a choice to break it off or to split the table into two different groups. Not at the same time either.
Yeah,
So
it's sort of like join a new group of friends, or like for example, you go to college and you happen to start talking to people. If that chemistry's not going to work between you guys, you're not going to really you're not going to stay friends for long, are you? It's the same for dating. If you're looking for certain attributes and certain things in a person, it's going to be the same in the table. The chemistry has to work, and it takes time to get used to each other and each other's habits.
yeah, that's true. But one thing as a new player, if you're looking for a game and you really haven't played before or not very much, I implore you, I beg you to take the time to see what's happening, to get to know the community, and to get to know the people who are running the games. You will eventually find a game. If you think you're going to be able to go from community to community and from platform to platform and rule set to rule set and find a game, you'll be very lucky. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I cannot guarantee the quality of that game. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way, but you're really skipping over these fundamental steps, which is getting to know the people before you really start playing with them on a regular basis. And that is something that I think most people fail in, including myself. There was times where I probably should have interviewed players and run some one shots before I actually ran the campaign.
Yeah, that's what I've started to do now. If it's a new group, I always run a few one shots with them, get a feel of them.
Yeah, and then you can kind of tell who needs more help. You're going to find your archetypes. There are some archetypes that you will find, and these are stereotypes, and I apologize if anyone falls into these categories or in between, but there are some archetypes out there, and they are stereotypes. So you have the guy who wants to argue the rules, and they call that the rules lawyer. This person probably knows more than you as far as the rules go, but they don't necessarily um, follow the rules according to the way that you want to play your campaign. So if you are the DM, you should have 90% of the say on how the rules go. And when you have a person that wants to argue about rules and that you're doing this wrong and doing that wrong, you may need to talk to that person and see if they can help you as opposed to making you look stupid. So that is something that is up to you how you want to handle. But for me, I don't mind the rules lawyers. They kind of help me keep in check. As long as they're not doing that to all the players and making them uncomfortable, I have no problem with someone saying, "Hey, that wasn't right." "Hey, that roll didn't happen right," or something like that. I don't mind that. So the rules lawyer can also be a good help. So they don't have to be the butthole or the know-it-all, they can be the guy that helps keep the game straight. And it is very helpful to have someone like that in a group. As long as they're not combative and they keep constantly doing it, then that's another conversation. And
I
then you
tend
go
to
ahead.
support Den in games. Sorry, to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I normally remember my Wednesday game with Den.
Yeah.
I tend to support him. He only says most nearly every session, like, Jankin, do you know this rule says? Oh, yeah, it's that. I don't. Of course, I don't know everything, but
Right.
if Den says no, I would want it to do this way. I'm not too sure about the rules. We can look later, and I'm like, exactly, that is how we should do it. Look at it later. We can decide. Oh no, we did that wrong. Next time we play, we'll do it this way. So yeah, there's ways to go about it. I think.
Yeah. Then you have the person that's quiet. You have the person that's shy, that may or may not want to role play. They may not open up till, the end of your campaign. Don't bypass these people up. They are learning usually, or they are shy about how they fit in with the table, their knowledge of the rules, or even their investment in the setting. So generally, if somebody's quiet, it doesn't mean they're a bad player. It could just mean that they haven't been engaged correctly, or maybe they're not getting what they want out of the campaign, or they can just be totally just shy and embarrassed, and they don't, they're just not outgoing. So if you have a player like that, let them find their groove, and at some point they will shine. And a good GM will make scenarios that will almost force that to happen. So if you've got a guy that's quiet and he plays a wizard or a ranger, he'll have his turn and his time in the sun. So just be patient with those people who are quiet. I honestly prefer those than people who talk over everybody, and that's my next archetype. You get the person that wants to be the center of attention. They tend to want to lead the party around. I don't have a problem having a lead person that wants to speak for the group, but they tend to run the whole game and they want the attention, they want the interaction. They do often role play or they metagame sometimes, but they want to be the person that's controlling everything except for the DM side. So you need to watch out for those people that overstep their bounds and that they don't turn off all the other types of players. I know I've been in campaigns myself where I didn't get a word in edgewise, and even when I had something good to say or some role play, that person had come through and just kind of stole the spotlight. So as a DM, you need to make sure that those people know that their behavior is a little bit too aggressive, and if it isn't working for the rest of your group, that they may have to find a different table where there's a bunch of people doing that. So you got to be careful with people who are gung ho. They're great players, but sometimes they can be too much. And
That happened to me.
uh huh.
My first proper campaign after you taught me.
Wow. Yeah, tough.
I had a player that kept always over talking me, playing music in the background, and he also said he was going paladin. I went a life cleric, and he came to the session as a. So every time I like stabilized someone or healed someone, he would do the exact same thing like a few seconds later, and it kept happening to me. And I said to the DM, and the DM was not willing to do anything about it. Yeah, so that was an interesting first ever game after learning how to use the system.
Oh wow. I've never had anyone try to copy exactly what I'm doing, and I don't know if that person was going out of their way to have a go at you, but to me, if I was a DM, I would have had to say something about it or changed it. I would at least ask you to quit and say, "Look, you're not having fun. You might as well, you might as well leave."
Yeah, I even offered to change class, and DM just didn't care, so I left.
Hmm. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That does happen occasionally.
Yeah.
Um, you get the world builder, you get the person who is inspired by the game, but they want to kind of do their own game now. So through the gameplay, they're thinking of how they can make their own game. So they're going to want to ask you questions about how you run the game, how you handle this, how would I make this and make that. That is a good thing. It's positive, but you can't have that in the game. And the reason why is it's fine to do a little role play, but what they tend to do is they want to steer the conversations and the mechanics as well as the lore either into their favor or into a way where they can, play something custom that they always wanted to play. And I don't mind that if that's done up front. But when it's being done backhandedly throughout the campaign, and once their needs aren't met and they get mad and they rage quit, then that's a problem. So the world builder is somebody that you want to employ that will help you come up with some of the lore. And if they're invested in your campaign, then it's usually not a big issue. And if they really want to play a unique character, they kind of need to be there at the beginning or at a juncture in your campaign where it makes sense. It'll be too hokey if all of a sudden you have some female players show up and she gets all these perks and cool stuff, and everyone else has standard characters. That can be a problem for your table. So try not to let that happen. That can be very discouraging for the loyal players who have been there for a while. So you want to be very careful about how you handle that. What about the discrimination part? I don't want to get into the social justice thing, but if I have a player who is gay or openly gay, I don't really worry too much. I think I don't change the way I play, and I don't really worry about what that player is saying or doing unless they're going out of their way to be a jackass. Same thing with female players. I really like female players. Actually, I wish there was more of them. They tend to get messed with by the table quite a bit. They either become a victim or a target of the individuals at the table, and I don't know if it's done because they need attention or they've had issues in the past. But then you also have these creepy guys that try to stalk them in and out of the game, and they try to contact them outside of the regular game hours, and they really make that person uncomfortable. And what they tend to do is they make all these sexual innuendos during the game, which can be in context to a point, but when it's overdone and done in poor taste, it kind of makes that player not want to play anymore, or that player will take it to the extreme and try to counteract that somehow. So you need to really be careful with sexuality and those sort of politics, because what ends up happening is those people will clash or they will rage quit or they will break the game. And there's nothing you can really do about that other than state some of these facts up front. Make sure that the people who are participating understand what they're getting into, and they need to also not be so hurt over the smallest little infraction. I think people get overly sensitive on these topics when technically it doesn't have to be that extreme or that bad. These are my personal views and opinions about it. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. I've looked at it, and the thing that I am kind of overly protective of my female players, and that may be seen as kind of weird or off-putting for a female too. They want to be treated as equals. They don't want to be babied. They don't want to be, considered, your pet. They want to play just as much as anybody else. So I would refrain from that being overly protective as well. They should
Yeah.
be able to hold their own, And if you're doing that, it kind of looks like you're either hitting on them or that you're just kind of being a creep. So you got to be careful with that. That is something you definitely need to avoid.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it shouldn't care about gender, race, or sexuality. It doesn't belong on the table. It should really matter about playing the game, and because the whole point of you playing D&D is playing something you're not. So, example, if I want to play a female character, like first I play a 10-year-old female character in another game, and another one I play, or like my dwarfs I normally play as well. I play them big, blurry, hairy men. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah, it only matters usually when someone gets hurt or there's a comment made in game. It could be a role playing aspect, and a little snide comment comes through, and then that person gets butthurt or they're offended, and then in real life they're mad, so they want to lash out to protect themselves. And that's a natural thing to do. Like when people are constantly being questioned and harassed, they tend to want to lash out. They're so used to protecting themselves that they don't really know how to behave in a social environment without going to that extreme. So you got to think of it in different ways. But for the most part, what Patty said is that stuff should not come into play into the table. And you don't pick on your token female. I see a lot of men tend to treat females as inferior. So because they're female, they don't know what they're doing, or they don't have any experience with games, which isn't true anymore. That may have been true a long time ago, but it isn't true anymore. As a matter of fact, there's more people, women playing now than there ever was. So there's no reason to treat them a lot different. I would try to be as neutral as possible, and the moment that the female becomes the focus of pretty much an all male game, then that's when you need to step in a little bit and say, okay, that's enough. So that's just something to keep in mind. So, anything else, Patty, that's related to players that we should cover? Or,
Um, yes, like I tend to treat a lot of my games, my online games, as if I was treating it like an in-person game. Like for example, if you know someone's being distracted, they're probably on their phone, or they're playing music in the background, hot micing. That is my biggest pet peeve. Well, I would suggest them to start using push to talk if they're hot mic, and even as a player, it annoys me because we might be covering something really important from an NPC, and then you have someone in the background playing ACDC all the time. You don't want to hear that.
yeah, I don't like the inattentiveness. I know there's some people that are some serious background noise. They got their families in the background. They're trying to play. Their kids are calling them. Their wife wants them. If that's the case and you're that guy or that person, I would honestly either try to find somewhere else to set up your computer or set aside some time for it and don't ignore your family like I've done. So basically, just keep that under wraps. Use push to talk. We don't want to hear your wife yelling and sniffing and coughing and burping and farting and all those human sounds don't sound too well when they're magnified times 10.
Yeah.
I have
Hey,
heard people sniff and clear their throat. It is so disgusting when it's magnified like that.
now some people can do this by accident. Fair enough. I've done it before, Leon, and I normally apologize. Oh crap! Sorry, guys, I didn't realize my mic was on.
Yeah.
Like for example, I have a mother who seems to always phone me when I'm very busy, either at work or playing a game. I think she can sense it or something. And if she's phoning me, I'll say to her, guys, can we just take a little 5 minute break? I've got a phone call. Or it's the same with door. Sorry, guys, there's someone at the door. I'll like 2 seconds, just carry on. I'll just mute myself and go, straight down the stairs and go and handle that. But yeah, it's a big key is communication. If things like that happen.
Yeah, I get that. can be annoying. And if it happens a lot, you're going to have to ask that player to either get a mic or a headset that works, or at least have them set a hard set, like even if they have to unplug it. I mean, just so they don't have to hear you eating potato chips and farting and all that other stuff. Um, there is a way to set AFK in Fantasy Grounds. So if you are going to leave the table, if you right click on your own portrait of the character you're playing, you can set AFK, and that DM will know to skip you if you're in combat, or even if it's just in between adventures. So there is a table etiquette that you can employ when you are in a campaign or you start a new one. And this doesn't all fall on DMs or on players. A lot of this falls on the DM too. What they allow, their play style, consistency is an issue. Preparedness is definitely an issue. And how much you're invested in the game, or are you invested in the people playing the game? So that is a big difference there, because I like to run games that I like, but I also have to remember that the players have to be sold on what you like, usually. Not always, but usually. So if you are running your favorite module and the players that are playing are not playing the way you want, that is on you mostly. It is basically your lack of preparation or research for the players that are joining your table. You may not have realized people's schedules. So you get people who are constantly missing sessions. So as the game master, it would behoove you to run some one shots and get to know people's schedules and who they are before you commit to a campaign, especially if it's something you really cherish, or maybe it's a module that you've written yourself. You're going to disappoint yourself every time if you just do it willy nilly all the time. You're not going to get good results. And more than likely, those scenarios that we discussed earlier are going to rear their ugly head and become a problem. So I'm not saying you'll never have that problem. You can't control every little thing, but you want to minimize it as much as possible. And that was the whole point of bringing those things up, is try to avoid that stuff, because that will break the games.
I tend to find new play people are also new to Discord. And I had one player who had screaming kids in the background and all that, but it was his first time in Discord. So I spent a little bit of time, say like half an hour with him, went through all his Discord settings and explained everything. And after that, he was brilliant. You could hear the kids screaming in the background. He was using push to talk, other thing, and it improved his game just as much as the whole game for everyone.
Ah, yes. So there is that. That is a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So when you are participating on Discord or Google Hangouts or any of those things, there is a learning curve for more than just Fantasy Grounds. You're learning how to um, interact with people. You're learning technology that you haven't messed with before. You are learning rule set. If you've never played a role playing game or that particular rule set, you're learning that too. And then, not to mention, you're taking time out of your day or out of your schedule to dedicate time to having fun. And when it stops being fun and it becomes more work, then it really isn't. I mean, it isn't it's not worth it. So you want to make sure that you are trying to set yourself up for a good time. Making things too complicated or complex or too techy, or maybe, you're trying to do audio and Fantasy Grounds and teach everyone how to play. I mean, that all that stuff can be very, very daunting and very, very poor on the DM. So if you want to include like audio in your setup, learn Discord and Fantasy Grounds first. Do it in steps. Like learn Fantasy Grounds, learn Discord, and then learn how to integrate audio. If you try to do all that at once, your players are going to get really bored, and they probably won't stick around very long because you yourself are trying to figure all the technology stuff out. So the more simple it is, the easier it's going to be for you to get that table going. You can always introduce that stuff as you go. You don't have to do it all at once. And that is something that I am guilty of.
Oh yes, I know. Oh, I remember the early days, Laerun. I do remember them.
All right, so let's look at some Fantasy Grounds stuff. I have some pet peeves that are very, very not as common. They are not something that you would recognize right off the bat unless you've used Fantasy Grounds for a while. Also, even if you know the 5th edition rules, there are some little nuances that Fantasy Grounds doesn't clearly illustrate until you get to use to the system. So I'm going to open up a character sheet and I'm going to make something. And I'm not going to build the entire character, but there are some things on here that I'd like you to be aware of. So here I'm going to load a module, which I've already done, and this is the pregens. So I'm going to go to library, I'm going to go to the pregens, and I have this pregener characters that I made. And let's see, I got Centaurus and Dorig and all my favorite friends, Figgin. And, I have a ranger named Laerun. That was actually my first character. Lord Gallimar, Namita, the assassin, Shara, the sorceress. I have Squire Valius. He works with Gallimar. That's a squire. Tristal is a druid. Zamas the barbarian, and Zayla Truesong is a bard. So these are characters that I had collected over the years that I converted into 5th edition characters. Now, some of the things that you should know about Fantasy Grounds are not always so obvious. And the reason would probably be that maybe you only play a couple different classes. And if you're the DM, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. You don't need to know everything, but you need to know a little bit about everything. And
Certainly helps.
it does. So the more you build characters, the more you can help your players. So I implore you as a DM to make one at least of every type of character. And it's not something you're going to sit down and do in one day. It's going to take months. But as you get used to that, you can help set up your friends' characters, and it takes a lot of the load off of you during the game. So you want to make sure that you kind of get this down. And even as a player, you need to know this stuff too. It's not all on the DM. You should know your character. So there's some things that come up during character creation that people forget or they don't realize. So one of the things is your speed. So your speed normally comes from your race. So when you pick a race, it will populate as 30 feet or 35 or 25, depends on the race you are. But if you go into the metadata, which is this, looks like a magnifying glass, there are some variables that you can add in here. One of them is a trait that you get from being a monk, and you get to increase your speed. So if you are a monk that doesn't wear armor or you have a certain feature that gives you faster movement, you would add that 10 here where it says armor, which is kind of it's misleading, but you'll have your base speed of 30 if you're human, and then you'll add the 10 from a feature that would come from the monk class. And those are things that people forget or that tend to get missed. It'll say it in your abilities section, but it doesn't apply it automatically. And I think one of the things that people get used to Fantasy Grounds doing 70% of their character for them. But there is that 30% that is not automated. So in that case, you would probably have to go in and edit that and add in the extra movement according to the features of your class.
Laerun, do you want to jump onto your table and I'll
Sure,
crack.
sure. I don't remember the alias though. Hold on a sec. Try Nosy Keep Meek Rogue. Nosy Keep Meek Rogue. So Nosy Keep Meek and Rogue. I don't think there's a password.
No. Meek as in EEK, yeah?
Yeah. So Meek Rogue.
Nosy Meek.
Nosy Keep Meek Rogue.
Yes, definitely correct spelling.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the alias. So there you go. There's a faux pas on my part. Write down the frickin' alias. Before you start, make sure that you write down the alias. I don't know how many times I've done this to me, my players, the students, when I don't know my own fricking alias. So that'll be a lesson to us. All right, so here's another thing to keep in mind is if you have a character, let's say here's Valius. Okay, I'm going to open this up. He's a second level fighter, and he has these abilities like fighting style defense. This says you gain you gain +1 to your armor class. So I think for the most part that is calculated in. Yeah, it's under miscellaneous. You have your base, armor, shield, none, and then this 1 is from that particular build. So basically, it'll add in all your features there. But not do they Fantasy Grounds doesn't know the other side of that, which would be if you have a long sword or a bow, you cannot use your shield bonus. So he has a magical shield that gives him a +3 bonus. That's quite a bonus. So you need to remember to either unequip the shield as a player, or if that's too inconvenient, you can make an effect that subtracts the shield bonus. So in this case, it should be -3 because he has a +1 shield. So I made an effect that cancels out the shield bonus. That way, when you're on the combat tracker, you do not benefit from the shield bonus. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I tend to do it the other way around. When I
Yeah.
don the shield, I add the coding AC free.
Mm-hmm. So if you have the shield equipped, this +1 shield, it'll automatically add it to your overall armor class. But if you forget to take it off, I think it's easier just to make an effect to subtract it until you're able to recover, and then you can remove the effect. Then that means you pick your shield back up, or you're using a weapon that only requires one hand. So that's something that most people forget, and I know I have. I've run games and never even thought about the shield bonus. So that is something you definitely want to think about when you have characters that have a lot of two-handed weapons or versatile weapons. So there's 6 of those. There's the long sword, there is the trident, there is a spear, there's a warhammer and a battle axe, and then there is one other long sword. So there's 6 versatile weapons. They can be used one-handed or two-handed. If you use them in a two-handed fashion, they do more damage, but you do not benefit from the shield bonus if you have it equipped. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Also, if you're using a bow or something that would require two hands, you do not get the bonus from the shield. So even if you're wearing it, in a way, I don't say it's cheating, but it's an oversight. So you want to make sure that you unequip the shield or you make an effect to cancel the shield bonus off. So that is something I teach in my classes when I can, but I sometimes forget about it too during gameplay. So I usually make that available on the character sheet if that player has a potential for that issue. So another thing that I want to point out is I have a dwarven cleric. His name is Dorig Rockfist. He's one of my earliest cleric players. That's what I usually play.
Oh, I remember him.
Yep, the bench sniffer.
Yeah,
You know
that's
that guy.
yeah, I know the bench shift sniffer.
Okay, so dwarves, they have something in their features. When you build a dwarf, normally you get this dwarven combat training. So what it says is you have proficiency with battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. However, this particular cleric build, you only get light armor, medium armor, normally. And then you get all simple weapons. So if that's the case, and this is also elves go through this as well, you need to list the specific armor or weapons that are above and beyond what you normally get. The reason I didn't add hand axe or light hammer is because those are already simple weapons. So all I had to do was add battle axe and warhammer. I did not have to list all 4 of those because those are included in simple weapons. Now he gets access to heavy armor, and it's not because of the dwarven combat training, it's because of his domain. So if you worship a god of war, in this case it's the forge, you might gain access to other weapons like martial weapons, or maybe in this case it's heavy armor. Whereas normally you would only have access to medium. So make sure that those are listed in your proficiencies so that you gain your proficiency bonus. A lot of people lose out on that, or they don't remember, or they don't know. Or they assume that Fantasy Grounds is already taking care of it. So that is something that you have to change manually. So you have to read through your features, see what it gives you, and make sure that you adhere to that and that you understand what that means. So for instance, you get an extra tool proficiency for being a dwarf. So you get these 3 different options: smith tools, brewer supplies, or mason's tools. So I put a note there. I picked smithy. So that is something I made into a skill. So I have smith tools. Now that doesn't come into play very often, but if I want to craft something or repair something, the roll is right there. It's ready to go. Also, I make sure I have the tools in my inventory. So smith tools happens to be in my inventory. So that way you can perform the actual work. So keep in mind the traits. Your racial traits normally override your class restrictions. So that is what I'm trying to say. You have
I
this. Go ahead.
I do tend to see that sometimes classes, or if you multi-class or some racial stuff, also tend to like duplicate stuff, like double weapons, double armor and
Mm-hmm.
proficiencies. You can easily just delete one and add them that Laerun has done there and there.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Let's see. So you have these other things that get left out. Like, for instance, respect of the stout folk. So this is more of a role play thing. This isn't something that's automated or mechanical, but it says you are a respected clan crafter. Um, and it's up to your DM and you as the player to talk about this. So there is a potential that this might come up during your campaign. So if you keep these kind of things in mind, it actually lends itself, because that's actually a feature. That's not just a background thing. So a feature means that, to me as a game master, that I should be looking to find a way to incorporate that into my game. Otherwise, there's really no point in having the feature. So, you're well respected. Um, you have these relationships, and it says here, any place where shield or gold doors dwell, and the individuals in such a settlement might vie among themselves to determine who can offer you, and possibly your compatriots, the finest accommodations and assistance. So that is huge. That means you have the potential, if your DM allows it, to have access to some really good accommodations and assistance. So these are things that tend to get left out of a lot of games, and I'm guilty of it as well. So if you're running a game, DMs, make sure you look at this stuff. And if it's a role playing thing, you want to try to include that somewhere or have it come up somehow in your campaign, if it's possible.
There's a certain sort of way I organize my characters, and I get my players to do it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, you can actually edit all those features.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, if someone had a fighting style, you can put in brackets what fighting style is next to the fighting style, if it'll later show
Yep.
you.
So like I
Uh,
did here, I put Smithy in here.
yeah, like that. You can. That's what I tend to do. And, like, for example, see when you level up and you get a feat, you
Mm-hmm.
can choose between increasing ability score or taking a feat.
Yep.
Normally, my players will like put in a little bracket to say that they took a feat, or if they take a feat and they add it to the ability when they ability, they'll put into a bracket to say when they gained it. So level
4.
level 4 feat.
Right. So I can do that right now. So in case you don't know how to level up or you have never had that opportunity, all you have to do is first you have to make sure the DM has the books open. Once that is established and you're on the table, you can come here with your DM's discretion. You can open up this little magnifying glass, and you'll see your XP and such. All you have to do is this class description, which is on the far right next to this used button. All you have to do is drag it over to the right and then back in, and it levels you up to level 4. It's that simple. Now at level 4, what Patty was saying is you get a new feature called Ability Score Improvement. So if you open that up, you should read it. It says that 4th, 8th, 12th, 16, and 19, you can increase one ability score of your choice by 2, or you can increase 2 by 1, or you can pick a feat. So what he's saying is notate whatever you do in this section. So if I wanted to, let's say I don't want the feat, but I want to improve some of my other things. So I'm going to put 1 in strength and 1 in dex. So by doing so, I would also want to notate it here. That way the DM knows what I chose and what I went after. So this is a good practice for DMs and players to get involved with. And see, this has a bonus proficiency. What is that? Aha. So when I choose this domain, which was the Forge domain, you gain proficiency with heavy armor and smith's tools. So I'm double proficient with smithy? No, because domain is tied in with the smithy. So actually this tool proficiency here, I would pick Mason's tools and then my feature would fill out the smithy part. Fortunately, I have Mason's tools and the Smith's tools. So I have both of those. So I need to change that note on the sheet here to say Mason. Now, it doesn't affect anything mechanically. It's just a courtesy for you and your DM.
Because potentially you'd have a player could change it halfway through the campaign,
Mm-hmm.
not even realize,
That's right.
which is classed as metagaming. So
Yes. So these are some things that I've gone over that I've noticed in classes that really are kind of little niggly things, but they do affect how the game operates. So my next thing is gold, or coins. So Fantasy Grounds doesn't technically track the weight of coins unless you have an extension, or if you take the weight of gold, which is roughly about a third of a pound, you could take that and make an item that weighs a third of a pound. And what you would do is you'd add up all the coins, put that in the quantity in your backpack, and it would reflect the correct weight or closer. So that way your characters are not running around with 10,000 gold, because that would be pretty heavy. So that is a way that you can get around Fantasy Grounds not keeping gold weight. That would be one of those things you'd want to do ahead of time. So you can actually go in, create an item, call it gold weight, put the weight in there, and put it in your inventory. When your characters start going over 100 gold or things like that, you can add the number or the quantity to that particular item, and it will track the weight. So that is a way to get around the fact that Fantasy Grounds does not keep the weight of the gold in mind. At that point, if you have 10,000 gold, you may want to smelt it down into a brick and put it in a bank. I wouldn't carry around 10,000 gold. No way. I would
I
be
tend
Fort
to,
Knox.
as a DM, I tend to notice slightly, but when it gets too much, I normally tell, I do then start to weight them down. But see if it's like, most. I try and use the common sense a little bit because it's just another number for me to calculate all the time, unless I get the extension numbers,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
I
I
always
agree.
avoid.
I don't like having to do all that either. But after they get a couple hundred coins, I start looking at it.
Yeah,
Because I
because
can just assume they're sharing the load amongst the 4 or 5 of them.
yeah, normally or you get like get your barbarian to start carrying stuff. Just make sure he doesn't do something stupid like throw it down a cavern or something.
So that's something that rarely comes up, but if it does, that is a suggestion on how to handle it, or don't worry about it. So here for the notes, one thing that I really encourage you to do, especially if it's a campaign, is to fill all this stuff out. You have a deity or some sort of philosophy, you have your alignment, and yes, you want to put it in there. Even though 5th edition doesn't really pay much attention to alignment as much anymore, it does matter mechanically for protection from good, protection from evil. Your personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, you can make those up or you can use the pre-generated ones that come with your background. One thing I've done here is I made a little attitude table, and this is a scale that I put 1 through 10. And what it is these characters all sort of know each other, they've all traveled together, and this is kind of how they feel towards each other. So a 1 is worse, a 10 is better. So you go down this list, and it kind of gives you their feelings towards other characters or other players. And I use that as a role playing tool. I don't enforce that on my players. I just kind of give them an idea of how their history was together.
It's more of personal flavor.
Yeah, it's personal flavor. The other thing is when your DM asks you to make a backstory, hopefully you can work with them on it and make up a paragraph or two. I don't want a novel. Like, I don't mind, but I don't need a book. I need like 2 or 3 paragraphs. Um, maybe even one would suffice. But I
Yeah,
also don't want a one-liner.
yeah, I like a few paragraphs as well, but I hate it. Well, for one shots, I'm not really that bothered about it because it's not gonna be that long. But see, for a proper campaign, I need a paragraph or two
Yeah,
because
I
so I
agree.
know how to integrate you into the game. Because
Yep.
later on, you may do something very similar. We
Yes.
normally have side stories. You know, if you're a notable background and you're ran away from home, you're going to have bounty hunters after you. Players might not know that until it happens, but people will try and date you back to home, or try and gain money from that, or you're part of used to be part of a assassins group where they're going to have assassins come after you because you know certain information they don't want to like. But I like that because it means I can play with you and get them more into the campaign and more into the character. But when someone comes to me for a campaign and I ask them to take a sheet and it's blank, it is a bit of a pet peeve for me.
Yeah. I had a guy that, I made sure that I told everyone if you don't have something in there for your backstory, I am not going to be too happy about it. I did actually require it to play in the campaign. So everybody but one person did that. And he said he couldn't really think of something. So he wrote, I'm a badass. That
I
was his
remember this.
that was his story. I'm a badass. And that really pissed me off. I was, you know, kind of livid at that point. But then I said, you know what? It was kind of funny. I had to laugh because it was so stupid it was funny. So I played on that and I actually made that come back in his face during the campaign. So he had a choice of, you know, traveling with his companions and they met up at a place where they can purchase mounts. Well, they only had so many horses. So I made sure that the only thing available for that particular player who said he was a badass, he was a fighter, that he only had a donkey available to him. So I made that donkey mess with him the whole time they were traveling overland. The donkey got into his food. The donkey would kick and buck and bray, and it just was a nuisance. He got to the point where he was getting adversarial with it and getting mad. And that's kind of right when I knew I had him. And they had an encounter shortly after that where they had some bandits attack them on their way to another town. And when it unfolded, the way everything worked was that the bandits were have the upper hand and the party members weren't doing so great. They were dying and, those sort of things, running out of healing spells and potions. The donkey actually saved the player character. It actually rolled by chance. It rolled a 20 and did a crit and it killed one of the bandits that would have killed the fighter. So the donkey saved the day and everyone was happy and it was funny and it was a really good moment. I was really proud of that whole how the dice rolled and everything. But then I was reminded of what he wrote on the back of his sheet. So when it came to his turn, I said, "So how do you feel about your donkey now?" And he says, "Fuck that donkey. We're going to eat it for dinner tonight to celebrate." And I made it to where the donkey was upset by his mannerisms. The donkey didn't know what he said, but the donkey did feel the negativity. So once he started acting like that, I let him know that, there's your badass right there. He's the badass. You are not. So the donkey, his nickname was Badass for the rest of the campaign. And the guy had to keep the badass donkey as his mount for the rest of the campaign. So the moral of the story is make a backstory if you don't want to be screwed with.
Yeah, agreed. And I love little stories like that. It's like you and my brother, innit?
Oh yeah, I want you to tell us a story about that damn wall. Remember
Oh,
that?
and the funny thing is, it's not the only time that happened. So when I first ran my sort of little one shot for two players, one of them was my real life brother, and Laerun joined to give me a bit of support and also just to get play as a player for a change. And Laerun, you were playing the actual dwarf right now, I
Yeah,
believe,
I was playing the bench sniffer.
and we'll get to that how that happened at some point. But I gave him a little simple. They started in a tavern. The tavern's daughter is missing. Usual, she's not came back for. No, sorry, it was the tavern daughter who said her father was missing. So they went to go and find out the last location of their father. They found all that, and then had to fight some goblins, I believe. And then they said also their suppliers not showed up. So they went to this farmstead. This little farmstead. It's like any typical farm, little city. It has this, picket fence, no, sorry, a little picket fence door and a little small wall. A lovely little home for a family. And that. Now, this small wall was like 2 feet. Like,
Yeah, like 2.5 or something.
yeah. Laeron's character was taller in this wall, and he's a dwarf. So my brother, he was playing a half elf rogue, and his rogue's not very smart, not smart at all. And he decided to, when they were investigating what was going on, they could see blood and all this thing. He decides to not just go over the wall or go through the gate. He decides to backflip over the wall. He rolls a 1 on his dex check, or his acrobatics check for it. So I made him. I says, well, I could really punch him for this, or I could just make it calm. I made him pretty much land on his face, and did a bit of damage, and it was mostly his pride was probably hurt. This is where Laerun decides to open the gate, go around there, and start to heal him and ask him if he's okay down there. And then he did nearly did the same thing as he opened the outhouse, and the outhouse was not cleaned for quite a while, and he just nearly landed into a pile of crap.
It was almost
And
like he was trying too hard.
yeah, and Laerun's character, for some reason, had a fascination of sniffing benches.
Yeah, Dorig's his eyesight is really bad, but he makes up for it with his nose. So he's got a big bulbous sniffer,
I
and
can see that nose. Is that based on your cleric, the image on your stream?
yes, he has
Yeah,
a
I can
big
see
bulbous nose.
the size of the nose. I also noticed your hair is different colors. If you noticed.
Yes, Weirdbeard. So it's Dorig, Weirdbeard, Rockfist, and his whole family is just really, their clan is super weird. But his thing is that, he can't see very well, so he relies on his sense of smell. And he can go up and he can kneel down, which he does quite often because he's close to the ground anyways, and he will sniff where somebody was sitting. So he will go to a place where someone had been eating dinner, and he can actually smell and feel like how long that person had been sitting there by the warmth of the bench. And it has to be reasonable. It's not like a super ability, but he can also tell what they ate. So he he
I
has
remember.
this.
I remember you rolling some perception checks using your nose.
They're at disadvantage, of course, but if they work, it's such a funny story.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I had another group. If you remember, Fee and Shaggy, they are my real life friends. And I did a one shot for them. I said, right, I'll just run them through the exact same game that I run my brother through, just to get them used to the fantasy ground. Fee, she was playing a rogue. She jumped over the fence, rolled a one, landed on her face. The exact same spot where my brother did it as well.
I remember you. I think you got a hold of me somehow and told me about it.
Yeah, it was before we ran Lost Minds. If you remember that. Oh. I can't hear you, Laerun.
Hold on.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Sorry, I thought my sound went there. But yeah, there's little stories like that, and being able to adapt to make little things that normally, like for example, most cases, my brother should have broken his neck, landing in that way he did. But I did it, so I want to make this fun. I don't want my brother to come into a game and die straight away from something stupid like that. That could ruin the game for him completely. So you need to be able to adapt to the situation and focus on focus on fun more than the rules. The rules are
Yeah.
really important, but they're more of a guideline.
Yeah. So some of the things I'm showing you guys are just little things I've noticed over the years that they're either forgotten, passed up, or usually considered not very important. I think everything is important, but not as important as having fun. So if you don't have, all this stuff on your character sheet, that's all right as long as you're willing to do the extra work that it takes to keep track of all this. So that's, something that you need to know and you need to practice and get used to. So a couple other things. There's some fighter features up here where it says weapons up on top. If you're a fighter or warrior, there are some features that'll allow you to crit on a 19 or a 20. So if you open up this metadata for weapons, which is this banner up here, you can change this to 19, and that only affects melee weapons. But if it says both, like ranged, like if it just says attacks and not melee, then it would be both. And if you roll a 19, it would treat it like a 20. Conversely, if you get extra damage dice because of your features, I think half orcs, they get menacing
Yes,
attack. So if I put 1 here, you get the extra crit dice automatically because of that feature. So that is where you change that. A lot of people don't realize that.
I don't think many races and classes really get that feature, do they?
No, it's very uncommon. That's why I brought it up because that's where you would do it.
That's like what my Zelga rogue did. If you remember that,
Yeah.
that was insane. That crit.
The other thing is if you have a weapon or a feature where you can re-roll, you put that in the properties of the weapon. So for instance, if I had a feature or maybe it's a magic item that gives me a special ability, after the properties, I'm going to put a comma, and then in capital letters, re-roll 2. So what that does is if Fantasy Grounds, I'll just show it now. So I'm going to roll damage. That rolled a 7, so that didn't change anything. So let me try it again. Okay, there's the attack roll. Oh, he almost critted. And now I'm going to roll damage. So that was a 6. So that didn't change anything. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, that was a 1. It re-rolled, and on the re-roll, I got a higher number, an 8. So it will re-roll once, but it has to keep the second roll. So if you roll a 1 or a 2 in this case, it will re-roll your weapon damage.
I won't lie, Laerun, I never knew that.
Huh?
I never knew that.
You didn't know what?
The reroll on the properties.
Oh, yeah. So you type this re-roll property in here, and if you put a 1 in there, that'll only re-roll once. If you put a 2, it'll also do 1 and 2. So that is how you add the re-roll property. Not too many features have that, but it is out there.
Is
There are
it what can be affected by that?
just damage and weapons. And I don't remember the feature, but it's a fighter ability. It's one of their features. I think it's the champion. I think he gets a feature like that. But that's usually who gets that reroll. Maybe it's a barbarian. I don't recall. I don't pretend to remember all that. But if you need a reroll in there that's constant, you would put that in the properties of the weapon. So that is often left out, or people don't know how to handle it. It doesn't keep re-rolling. So if you roll a 1 or a 2 and it re-rolls, that's the number you pick, even if it rolls a 1 or a 2.
Will that work for any damage effects like spells and effects and that? For damages?
I don't think so. I'm not positive though, but I
I'll
don't
have
think
a
it would.
I'll have a little mess about, see now.
Yeah, I've never seen it in a spell damage thing. Now, I'm not saying it won't work, but I've never seen it. The other thing is on this particular character sheet, this is a preference thing. You don't have to do this, but I set up a consumables area, and you do that by clicking on the edit button on the bottom right corner, and then you click on the star, and that actually adds a new category. It defaults as powers, but you can call it whatever you want, and you do that by typing something over here in the right hand side, because that determines what category it's going to go into. So I'm just going to type new, and if I click over here, it updated the header to new. So then you can add all these lines as you need to. So this is my healer's kits, healing potion, rations, torches, and water. So these are items that are basically one-time use. So if I get out of the edit mode and I change this over to preparation, then I can set how many quantities I have based on the inventory in my inventory section. And I set these to once. So combat and group, if I change this to combat and actions, now I have these bubbles. So as you use these, it'll tell the DM that you're using them because it goes into the chat window. And if you use all of them, like let's say your water, it disappears off your sheet. So then after the session is done, or before the next session, you can go and update your inventory so it will calculate the weight properly. So it doesn't tie in with the inventory directly, but it's just a handy dandy way to keep track of your consumable items. Huh. So do you use that, Patty?
Yeah, I do the consumables as well.
Cool. It's not
Um,
necessary, but it is helpful.
yeah, it helps. So, like, You can also, like, for example, if you have a monk, you can do your key as also a modifier or counter. You can do it multiple ways. I normally have my key separate from my actual monk abilities because some of them use two, some of them use one. So then I can keep track of much key I have. Or it's also the same for like there's all you can also do the brackets as well for certain abilities. Like, for example, Paladin Lay on Hands. You can use as much as you like into your modifier by your paladin level, sorry, times by 5, or unless you're an Azimur or something. And I normally put in bracket how much I got left out, so I'll have bracket the amount of I've got left slash my max
Mm-hmm.
bracket.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I have certain ways of doing stuff because I know some people who like have 50 little counters for lay on hands,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
have to click and spam it, and I'm like, oh god, stop, please.
I hear you. The other thing you can keep track of is like charges on magical weapons, things like that. That would be very helpful for that.
Yeah. It would be nice to have that reroll for ability checks and spell
Mhm.
effects and stuff.
Yeah, it would. You might be able to put it in there. I'm not sure.
Maybe there's a reroll effect, an
Another
actual effect for it.
another thing that you'll notice is, let me see if I can find something here. So I'm going to go to the NPCs and I want to find like a fighter type. What would be a name of an NPC fighter? Or anything that's more character based. Maybe a bandit captain?
Yeah.
Okay, bandit captain. Okay, he's got 65 hit points. He's a what? CR2. So what level would you think he would be based off of that?
So I need to.
So he's 65 hit points. He has 10d8 for his hit die. So what? Level 10 maybe? 9 or 10?
Depends on his class. You'd probably class him as a rogue, wouldn't you?
Yes, yes. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I would say around about 9, 10, yeah.
Okay. So when you have a NPC like this, you don't have all the rogue features. This one has a multi-attack. He has a scimitar, a dagger, and he does have this parry, which is pretty cool. So what that does is it just adds 2 to his armor class, which isn't bad. That's pretty fairly easy to do. But if you have these conditions and effects, which is a module made by a third party, and I'm going to click here, and right now this only has the standard conditions, which are, 5th edition standard edition or standard rules that you would add to your characters as they came up across these particular conditions. But there is a module that was put out that will allow you to load additional effects, and you can make these yourself if you want. So let me see. It's called Conditions and Effects. It's on the DM's Guild. And once you load that, you will have all of these different effects here. I mean, there's a ton of them. So if you wanted sneak attack for this rogue, instead of doing it manually, I think you could set up an ability or some sort of special move where you can have that at your fingertips so you don't have to do it manually. So here's sneak attack right here. So if this bandit is in the combat tracker and I go to the effects, I can put sneak attack on him. And when he rolls his damage, he's going to get an extra d6. So this is helpful for when you have NPCs that are more like player characters and you don't have all the features covered here. The other thing you can do is unlock these characters and add this stuff in as part of their actions, which is the cleaner way to do it. But if you don't have this custom effects, you have to learn what all the language is for this. But this is just an example of a lot of the things that are not included. It's kind of annoying because NPCs, non-playing characters, are not really monsters. And they are usually missing a lot of those effects that could otherwise be automated. The other way to handle this would be if he attacked with his dagger. Let's say he's going to attack Dorig. So he has this damage here of 1d4 plus 3 damage. So if I drag this over, I can right click and that adds the additional dice. But it actually rolled the 6 as well. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with these particular effects. And once you learn how to use this stuff, it makes the game a little bit easier and not so convoluted as to how to add these things into a combat or into a role-playing situation. So that is just an example of some of the frustration that I'd gone through when I first started Fantasy Grounds. It is difficult to find NPCs that are complete. So you might have a character that's a 9th level character, and they'll have all these skills and features and such. But if you pull up an NPC sheet that's similar to the character, they'll only have part of the skills and some of the features of that class. So I guess it kind of depends on how much you're going to use that NPC and how important they are to the campaign. So you could put more detail into it if you had to. So for instance, this particular creature has a non-ID, it says unidentified creature. I'm going to put, cloaked man or cloaked humanoid. All right, cloaked humanoid. If you click on this identified item, now this is more of a DM thing, but even as a player, if you're exploring your stuff, now it'll say cloaked humanoid when you add them to the combat tracker. So they don't see bandit captain. That's kind of giving that away. It's kind of stupid. So once they know who he is, or he tells them that he's the the leader, then you can identify him either from the stat block or from this particular combat tracker. So that is a cool feature that a lot of people don't use or they forget about.
Yeah, Drake Tales are talking about reactions on players and that. So like each combat, you get one reaction per player. Everyone has one reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about ways how to handle that. And like one of the ways you could add it, like your key point and all that. But once there's
Mm-hmm.
no per round option for it, it's only daily once and rest.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another way you could do it. You could use a reaction effect and apply that only lasts one round.
Right. And that would be, let's see, if you had something like that and on the effect itself, if you made an effect, even if it doesn't do anything mechanically, it could be a note.
Yeah, like the DM could add that to their effects list,
Mm-hmm.
and all they got to do is just apply that to the player, and it only lasts one round, and then
So if that's the case, you can set this to last how many rounds you want it to last. You could choose whether it can be targeted or if it's just on self, and then when to expend it. So you can tell Fantasy Grounds on the next action it expires, or on the next roll, once per modifier, or never. So you have a chance to add that if you make it an effect. So is there any other little things, little niggly things that anybody in the chat wants to know about, or something that they're not sure about, or even you, Patty, if you have something that has bothered you over the months?
Not being prepared for a campaign.
Yeah, that's kind of on you or on the DM.
Yeah, but also the player side. Like if you say you can only do so much as a DM to say to players, "Can you please make sure you're ready for this?" And not communicating is
Yeah.
also a pet peeve. Like there's a
Yes.
lot of stuff that isn't really related to Fantasy Grounds, but it's like related to D&D or any sort of tabletop in
Right.
general. So it's like universal rules and unwritten rules, but normally you would set the rules onto session 0, but we're all human, and some people don't really follow the rules sometimes that you set.
Right. Yeah, I think the preparation thing is up to the DM. They should be doing some prep, even if it's just a little bit. A little bit goes a long ways. The other thing is the scope. When you want to play, how long do you want that to last? You won't.
Generally, you would normally set how the maximum time for each game to run, but I don't know if you ever heard of this, but we have a sort of sign up stuff. I'll get the link for it now, and we have
Okay.
a sign up so that people can. Well, someone will make this sign up, right? Everyone clicks on it, and they can select what days and times they can make for the games. And we use it for a Wednesday campaign because sometimes we don't always run Wednesdays, if you've noticed.
Hmm.
And some people says, "Oh, I'm going to be a little bit late, but this is the time," and then we'll set that as the start time. Also, you have Discord and phone, just to make there's ways to say, I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit late." And I'm like, "That's fine, we can wait for you, we don't mind." And if someone joins the table and like, guys, just so you know, I do need to drop out a little bit early today. Just parry on. You don't need to worry about if I need to leave, but just so you know. Normally, it's a good idea to set in stone at the start of the game, or just before the game starts, so that they know, and you give enough time for the DM to react to a missing player, and especially for homebrew stuff. Sometimes, homebrew stuff are set for that player count that might be coming for that session. And if you do come there and we give it a little bit more notice, it thinks, "Oh, okay, fair enough, I can just add a few NPCs." I tend to over prep, which is a good and a bad thing. Like, for example, I prep for the amount of players are coming, but I'll have this little more encounter just in case they get it too easy, or another player says, "Oh, I can able join now." So I try to be reactive to my players.
But that's proactive too, so that's good.
And I do have the knack to run stuff on the fly. Like when I ran that campaign for you and my brother, and I can't remember who else was playing with us.
I think Frank.
Yes, it was Frank.
Yeah.
And that big spider you guys fought
Hmm.
in the what do you call it, in the basement, because there was a kobold summoning something, or he was doing some sort of ritual. That had nothing. I did that on the fly because you guys were mowing everything down. So
Yeah, that's something that can be handy. Now, speaking of that, if you were going to make an adventure and you wanted the adventure to be played over and over and over, so a replay value to it, not a one shot, not a campaign that you only run once. I would say like a module that you're building that you're always going to use as your go to. Maybe you make your own one shot as your introduction game, and that gets played more than once. You can kind of increase the replay value by having tables and also creating random encounters that are based within the context of the story. So, for instance, I'm going to add on on the combat tracker, I'm going to add a couple more players. So there's Laerun, Figgin, Centaurus, and Shayra. Okay, full party. And then before I do anything else, that is the first step. So if you're a DM, you always add your players to the combat tracker once they're complete. Then you add them to the party sheet if this is a campaign. Sometimes when I'm running one-shots, I don't worry about it. But you add them to the party sheet always after that. Try not to add NPCs or animal companions, those sort of things, unless they are meant to be leveled up. Because generally this is where the loot and the experience get awarded. And if that player isn't permanent, or you have an animal, that's really kind of silly to ruin the pool of experience and coin, unless it's intentional.
You can make, for example, see if you hire a guard, right? Role wise, that guard is to take a cut in the XP because it's helping you.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do is maybe make a little NPC, name it guard or whatever his name is, and just add it to the party sheet when you reward XP, and then remove it afterwards. So then it
Right.
automatically does the maths for you. Then you don't have to worry about, oh crap, I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, is you guys always want to add the characters or the monsters to the combat tracker first. I don't know how many times I've seen people do this, especially when you're new. What they'll do is they'll open up a map, and this map has no grid. It is just an image. So if you drag over a token, it's not going to scale properly. So you need to make sure that there is a grid on here. So if you're the DM and you're setting this up, first thing you want to do if there's no grid is you right click on the map, click layers, click set grid, and then you're going to set the size of the grid to whatever you would like. And
They would be giants.
I would advise that you find maps that don't already have the grid painted on there so that you're not going nuts trying to line it up.
So later on, I just linked it's called whentomeet.com, right?
Oh, okay.
And I just made a little, just a little quick meetup thing. And what it
Okay.
is, people sign into it. They
Mm-hmm.
make their own name, and their password's optional, but it's best to have a password so people can't use your name. And then the players will select the days that they can play.
Cool.
And you normally set the time. That'll be the sort of time frame, but it doesn't mean we will always play that amount of time. So, like for example, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I've set it so that I can play between 7 and 11, and also Friday. But
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, I have something. I'm going to be at work, and I'm going to get home around about 8. It's like 7:30 or something, and that gives me a bit of time, to get home, maybe make a cup of tea or make something quick to eat, and then get onto the table and start getting. And it's only a small session, but a short session's better than no session. And then there's the Wednesday where I'm a tad a bit late, but then I have to leave just after 10 o'clock because, like for example, I'm up like say 4 o'clock in the morning or something, getting ready for work. That sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. It's
Got it.
really useful, and it also auto converts into your time zone as well.
Cool.
The only issue, it doesn't take daylight saving into account. So, like say, if it's Sunday, I think the US are changing their
Mm-hmm.
time zone.
Yeah.
It wouldn't automatically update, and you'll be either an hour ahead or behind on your times. It's weird. I don't know
Well,
why it doesn't do that.
that's not too bad, I guess, but
You can just make a new one. That's what happened to us for my Starfinder character creation. For my players,
mm-hmm.
we were a little bit out because it had to be done on the Sunday.
Ah, okay. So the moral of this is, now that I have the grid on here, when you add the characters, they automatically will scale to the grid. So now they're all on the map, they're on the grid, and they will be shown correctly as they should. Now that I have that, I'm going to make an encounter for these guys, and this is kind of cool. So I'm going to bookmark this so I don't lose it. So I'm going to make some sort of wilderness encounter. How about some red caps or something like that? They're not in this module. I'll just do some goblins. Here we go. So here's a goblin boss and some goblins. So I'm going to make a new encounter. So first of all, I'm going to add this as a new encounter. And instead of doing this as, a planned out encounter with the, certain numbers of creatures, instead of doing that, I'm going to make it a random encounter. So this one will roll dice to see how many you encounter for that particular encounter. So what I'm going to do is add a new encounter, and this is going to be the goblin attack. So now for the goblin attack, I'm going to drag over goblin, and I'm going to bring over the boss. So I only want one boss, but he might have a different amount of minions. So what I want to do is to kind of level this out. So no matter how many people I have in the party, that this encounter will balance itself out a little bit. So it does not take in consideration CR level and the character classes and types, but it does take in consider quantity or the amount of characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1, because regardless, I only want one boss, regardless of the size of the party. So for the goblins, instead of rolling 1d4, I always want to have one more goblin than there are party members, regardless of the size of this party. So it comes off the party sheet and not the combat tracker. So what I'm going to do is put 1 plus the number of PCs. And what that does is it tells Fantasy Grounds to look at the party sheet and then calculate based on that. So now when I roll, I should have 6 goblins and a boss. Yep, exactly. So if this changes, if you don't have 5 characters or 6 characters, then it will change this number based off of that. So the value of this would be if you ran this module 50 times and you wanted to keep this somewhat balanced and you don't want to have to go in and manually adjust your encounters, you can use those formulas to kind of keep this somewhat balanced. So there's some other syntax you can use. So let's say I only want half the number of goblins than there are PCs. So conversely, I would put the slash here, which is divide, and I can put 2. So now it's the number of PCs divided by 2. So subtraction and division are on the right-hand side of the operator. Adding and multiplication are on the left-hand side of the operator. So now when I roll, it's 2.5 goblins. It always rounds down, plus the boss. So there's different ways you can kind of balance the encounters based off the number of PCs in the party sheet. So I don't think this would be practical for just a one-shot or a campaign you're only going to run once. But if you're going to run this module 100 times, I think that this method would be a little bit better than just setting up a range of encounters. So that is something I encourage people who make their own content. If you think that module is going to be run 100 different times and you don't know how many players are going to be playing, you can set it up that way to where those encounters scale with the number of players in the party sheet. but it'll have to assume that you know what the CR level is already and the type of creatures. It doesn't take into account XP or CR level, just quantity.
The good thing about this is, no matter how the size of your party, they're going to sort of like level at a similar rate if you run this campaign for multiple people.
Yeah, that's true. But at least you have other tools available to you if you need to do so. I don't think very many people will use this, but it is kind of cool. So we're kind of going over some kind of obscure kind of lore or things that Fantasy Grounds is capable of doing. Um, there are some really cool extensions out there that will add features and functionality to Fantasy Grounds. But again, you got to research them and figure out how they work and how they're going to apply to your campaign. And that's half the battle. Once you learn how Fantasy Grounds works, you have to learn how it interfaces with your rule set. That is paramount. That is one of the things that's lacking, and that comes with time. So I can sit here and give you all these little talks and classes and such, but until you start playing and understand how it affects the game and your players and how it interfaces with the rule set, there really is no good way to teach that. That comes with time and experience. So I think that's the only thing I can really think of that cannot really be taught. It has to be experienced. So do you have anything to add to that, Patty?
No, I completely agree with it. It's always a learning experience. Like, I've learned something today that I never knew about the reroll thing. It's
Hmm.
you can't cover everything in Fantasy Grounds. It's you take it in bite size, but sometimes you do forget things. But it's human to do that,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't worry about knowing everything.
No, I don't know everything.
Yeah, focus on getting the basics down, and then learn all the advanced stuff as you go along. It's the rule of thumb I know.
And it's the best policy, I think, because you're going to drive yourself bananas if you think you're going to memorize all this stuff. If you do, you got a really good photographic memory.
Oh yeah, there's people. I do know I remember more that other people like, but that's normally due to you know I use it so much that it's dug into me. It's more second nature now. But as I said, I even learn everything every day. That sometimes players teach me stuff that I never knew about, or it's because I don't really use that certain class or that race much that I don't know about too much.
Hmm.
But there's so much content that if you put too much effort in trying to remember everything, you're not going to have fun, and it's going to feel more like a job than an actual game.
Right. I agree with that. I used to try to control every aspect of it, and it just drove me nuts. I couldn't make heads or tails of things, and I mean, my notes were larger than the campaign, so it just gets to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much all I have for tonight. If there's any questions before we go, or if you have anything else, Patty.
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything. And as you said, if there's any question you guys want to ask, ask away.
Yeah, we got about 8 viewers, and most of these people are probably pretty smart and already know what's going on. So thanks for joining us, everybody, and hopefully we could do this again sometime. Maybe with a different rule set. I don't know. Maybe we could do it with Starfinder next.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait until I at least get a little bit of my head around the system. It's not as bad as some systems that I've tried to get into, but it's very similar to 3.5. I'm finding, so I'm enjoying it so far. It's just a bit of a learning curve at the moment.
Yeah. If you guys haven't been to the college in a while, We have added rooms for specific rule sets. That was something that I was against in the beginning, but I think we've grown past that. So now we do actually have rooms for specific rule sets because of the amount of traffic that we have in our community. We are over 5,500 strong with anywhere between 700 to 1,200 people active in any given time of the day. And out of those people, probably half of them are in FGC. So that's a lot of people at once. So we
Yeah,
had to kind of, you can make categories now. So it's a lot nicer to, you can add a few more rooms now without
yeah,
getting
we
too
didn't have
clustered.
that in the past, if I remember right. And
Yeah, it was horrible.
yeah, and you also had the people who sort of hated on certain other rule sets, and that was one of the main reasons why we didn't have it, I believe.
Yeah, Cerulean 10 says Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, we have a Call of Cthulhu room, and I might talk to that team and see if they would want to do something like the show that we did today. But yes, we have a Call of Cthulhu room in which people can go in there and discuss things related to that. We have about 5 or 6 people in our community that are into Call of Cthulhu quite heavily, and we have like 3 or 4 instructors now. Whereas before we didn't have anything else. I don't remember having Call of Cthulhu back then.
We did no, we didn't. We had one Starfinder, I believe,
Yep.
a few Pathfinders, mostly all 5e, and I think we had a 3.5 and a second edition.
Mm-hmm. And we
We
had a
didn't have
Savage
many.
Worlds, right?
Oh yeah, Savage Worlds. Sorry, get me
Yeah.
wrong. I don't really play Savage Worlds much.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice
So,
man.
Sterling, are you in the college already, or are you kind of from the outside in? Um, oh, okay, cool. That's good news, man. I really like to see that. If you need any support, or if you want to just do like a one shot to gather people together that you want to make sure they're part of a campaign, you can use the college for that. That I actually encourage that. We don't post campaigns in our community, but I do allow DMs to run their one shots or maybe a session zero so that more than just one person gets a chance to play, even if it's not a campaign. So we try to encourage you to set up one shots until you get your crew and then bring those people into your campaign.
Because
So,
that's what I wish to do for Starfinder once I have more experience with it. Do a few
yes.
one shots for new players and get them used to the campaign, and maybe some 5e one shots.
Yep.
You know,
And you,
depending on how my real life's going. For it.
yes, of course. So if you want to use Fantasy Grounds as your testing grounds, you're welcome to do so. The only reason we don't have the list of looking for games is because of the fairness, and it kind of goes against the teachings that I've tried to set out. My idea is that you get together with people, you play with them in practice games and such, and then you decide who you want to play with you. Instead of just saying, "Oh, I got this game, anyone can show up." I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of almost a waste. It does work out though occasionally. So you're doing a game with Monkey Boy. Right on. Monkey Boy's a really cool dude.
Yeah,
Yep.
I spoke to Monkey Boy because he
Yeah.
says, yeah, I had to chat with him on the Fantasy Grounds chat for a while,
Cool.
a few days ago actually.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool cat.
But
Yeah.
maybe at some point later on, when I get used to the Starfinder a bit more, and maybe I can try and see if the other Starfinders will be up for doing a little sort of like group chat about Starfinder.
Yeah, that would be cool. We have a guy in Brazil that's really heavy into it, and he does speak English. Um, we have 3 or 4, yep, Clunt, and a few other people that'd probably be interested. I have a feeling that if you get enough people playing and just switching it up, that you get that interest in there, so it's not always just fifth edition stuff. And I do intend to encourage that. The only thing I could say is that it's kind of up to you to do that. The college really doesn't have any control over what people want to play or how they want to play or spend their time. But if you're willing to step up, show people how it's done, run one shots, you can kind of build your own little empire. That way you're not always going, oh, well, you guys only do fifth edition. Well, that's just because that's what most people know. It has nothing to do with what we are trying to do. It has more to do with the people that are playing it and presenting it. So if you want to grow a specific rule set, by all means, I will support it. I have no problem with it. The thing that I don't want to do is, to be honest, that's what's put me off Fantasy Grounds in the past. Yeah, I can understand that. We've actually had some big battles over that kind of thing. Um,
Oh
it's
God.
it's really more up to the people that are doing it. It has nothing to do with Wizards of the Coast. It has nothing to do with the people playing it or running it, or the people that are interested in other rule sets. To be honest, it's you. You're probably the one who has the problem more than the problem itself. Meaning that it's up to you to make things happen. And if you don't, then I have a really hard time hearing it. So if you are trying to run one shots, um, I think that I would support it. I would advertise it. I would try to get you some more people to play. But if you come in and say, "Oh, I don't like your community. You have too much 5e," then that really doesn't do anything. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't help. It's
Yeah,
just
because
negative.
we had I had someone blow up me before in the past,
Hmm.
and I pretty much I was honest. I was very blunt with them. I says, "Well, if you want this to work, you need to do something about it." And they just didn't like it. And I'm thinking, well, how can I? I can't really do much bar tell you that.
Yeah.
And they just some people just don't like hearing that.
Hmm.
Even though we are trying to help them, it's just the way some people are just like that. I can't do much about it. I can't change the way someone is. I can only, give them the information, and how they use it is really up to them.
Yeah. There's a lot of things out there that people can be doing, but when they want to just come into your community and bitch about what's not there and focus on what they can do, then I don't have time for that. I mean, there's no room for that kind of thing. And that's kind of like the college, I complained that, yes, exactly. Some people want everything on a silver platter. I get, yeah, I understand that. We get people that want instant satisfaction, and that's not how this community works. The community works because of people like us that are actually willing to teach, to spend the time to recruit, to actually be a role model, and not somebody that just complains when things don't go right. I just can't do it. I don't have patience for that. So basically, when I started the college, I was mad because of Fantasy Grounds. I didn't like their advertising. I didn't like the way it was documented. I thought it was very frustrating. And, once I put that little whining down and I decided to do something about it, it actually went pretty well. I met Patty. I met other people. They kind of had the same feeling I did, and it grew. So we focus on what we can do, not what we don't have.
As much as to blow the college's own horn, if it wasn't for the college, Fantasy Grounds probably wouldn't have been as successful as right now.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's really. I remember when we first started out, and I know some people laughed at us
Oh, I know.
because people thought we were, doing something pointless, and we just stuck to our guns, and look where we are now. The QNT is humongous. Fair enough, I've been away for a while, but I'm just here now as a guest.
But you can
But
see where it's where it started, where it went, and where it is
Exactly.
now.
Yeah, I remember all the the days the days where we nearly gave up because we were getting frustrated as well. But it, we stuck to our guns, and we've got like a very large community now. And I'm proud to say that I was part of that community. I helped that,
Yep. And
and
I've
I will
never,
always. No one
yeah,
can take that away from me.
yeah, I've always thought that way too. Even when you had left, I never thought of you as not the co-founder,
Yeah, and
regardless. So,
yeah, and it was amusing to come back recently, and people thought I was trying to steal your role, and
oh, I know. I
I
wasn't
was
I wasn't worried about it. You and I have already had our discussions and our differences. I I've never really hated anyone. The only thing I don't like is all the politics and all the little things that go on behind the scenes. I would rather teach and just, keep spreading the good word and not having all that other crap go on. But it is part of running a big community. It's just part of doing business, I guess.
yeah,
But
you need to be able to willing to listen people
yes.
and be more forgiving. I
Yep.
was less forgiving compared to you, but you're the other side of the spectrum where you were too forgiving,
Yep.
and we were too far off the other directions. And but we balanced each other out for quite a long time.
Yeah,
I
we
remember.
did. I really like that too. Um I do have people that disagree with me in my panel, but they keep me balanced. They keep me in check from acting too crazy or too biased. Um, yeah, so that is a good thing. But as far as growing rule sets, it's really up to the people that play the game. But also, I remind them that this comes from the top down. So it starts with Smiteworks. They get the licenses, they put the development team in place, and they do the advertising. So if they're not putting as much effort into the rule set, then it falls on the community to do so. Whereas
Like
5th
Star
edition,
Wars and things like that.
yeah, Star Wars, yeah. So people who are very passionate about those rule sets, they'll make their own. They don't wait for Smiteworks to do it. Um, Smiteworks spends a lot of money and time on 5th edition because that's where 80% or 70% of their revenue comes from. So they look at the bang for their buck. And that unfortunately translates into our community indirectly. They don't do
Yeah,
it intentionally, it's just a business thing.
yeah, exactly. Because if it wasn't for 5e, Fantasy Grounds wouldn't be here, right, Paul, right there. Or it would probably be based on Pathfinder or 3 point 5 if or I don't know about fourth edition because I never looked at it, but I know it was a bit of a lot of people have hatred for fourth edition,
Yeah.
but fifth edition is so user friendly, and it was easier for them to implement. Where that funds them, and then they can spend more stuff on the program and get more rule sets. So for 5e is very beneficial for all rule sets.
Yep. It's kind of like the gateway drug. Once they get into 5e, there is potential that they're going to want to try the other rule sets. So
Yeah,
that's a thing about it.
because I've been wanting to get into Starfinder since the let go, but I wanted to get used to the program. I wanted to get back into D&D because I had sort of a long time, away from D&D, like tabletop. I only played D&D through like programs, like games, like never went to nights 1 and 2,
Right.
but actual tabletop, I haven't played since I was a kid with my family and that.
Hmm.
So it took me 2 years just to get used to getting back into it, and then now I've only recently started getting into Starfinder.
Hey, George, what's up?
Hey
So,
George.
yeah, so, we tried our best to show people how Fantasy Grounds operates. Sometimes it is a little bit more biased towards 5e, and that's because we don't know all the rule sets. That takes time. There's no way to force everyone to learn every rule set. And rule set diversity is rare in our community. There's only a few people I know that know all the different rule sets. So that is a weakness that we have as a community, but it also allows people to specialize in the rule set that they prefer. So it has its pluses and minuses. But I can guarantee you that if I opened up Pathfinder, I can pretty much figure out where everything is, even if I don't know the rules.
It's very similar.
Yep.
Usually.
Yeah, he's saying you can't expect tabletop players to know every rule set either. Right.
It's just you don't expect to know everything that ins out of one rule set. You shouldn't have to expect to know everything of everything. It's too much. It's too much information. You're going to end up just burning yourself out.
Oh yeah. Believe me, I've been there. So I think we're gonna leave off there. If you want to watch this later, it'll be on demand. I'll upload it to our YouTube channel later. And if you want to be on the show or if you want to show your rule set, let us know and we'll try to get you up there. I'll moderate it for you. You can show off what it does, what you know about it, those sort of things. So that way, it will come across and you'll get more people that might be interested in it. It really is up to you. I mean, you are the advocate for your rule set. And if you don't like what's happening around you, then honestly, you either have to move or get involved somehow and help push it. And that's the only advice I can give you on that. Other than that, I can't really say much else on it. So I think we're over, Patty. I think you should go back to bed if you can.
Yeah, nearly midnight.
Yeah.
I'm up at 5 o'clock.
All right.
I'll be heading to bed in a few minutes. I just need to do
All right.
things.
Cheers, man.
But thank you for having me on here, man.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of fun. We'll have to
But
do this every now and again.
yeah, I'll be up for that definitely. And hopefully, guys, I'll see you in the college.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Good night or good morning, good evening.